questions. So
Okay.
welcome everyone. My name is Jason Petticone. I am the president and founder of the Paideia Institute. We're very happy to welcome today Professor Bernard Frischer to our live public lecture Zoom series. This is a series of talks that we started doing for obvious reasons during the pandemic. We thought we'd make the best of the fact that we were all stuck at home and try to find some of the coolest, most interesting people doing things in classics and related fields and offer free online lectures so that people could learn about their initiatives. And so Bernie's work is perfect for this. And so we're very happy to have him here. We're going to be doing this regularly. So I think this is our fourth or fifth free public lecture online. And even though the pandemic is subsiding, we're probably just going to keep doing this at least once a month and possibly more frequently. So please keep an eye out and join our mailing list if you haven't already. Okay, so Professor Frischer is a digital archaeologist who writes about virtual heritage, classics, and the survival of the classical world. He has a BA in classics from Wesleyan University, which he received in 1971, and then went on to get a Ph.D. in classics from the University of Heidelberg in 1975. He has held the Rome Prize at the American Academy in Rome twice, where he's focused on Roman topography and archaeology, and also in the Fototeca Unione as a photographer and topographer, and also served 2 summers as assistant professor in the Academy's summer program on Roman topography. After that, he taught at UCLA from 1976 to 2004. And then in the fall of 2004, he moved to the University of Virginia, where he directed the Digital Humanities Research Center and was professor of art history and classics. In 2013, he joined the School of Informatics and Computing at Indiana University, where he directs the Virtual Heritage track. Virtual heritage is a new field studying the ways of applying the new 3D technologies to research and instruction in fields such as anthropology, art and architectural history, and conservation science. In 2016, Bernie founded Flyover Zone, which is a leader in the new field of virtual tourism, which is designed to take his work with Rome Reborn to a broader public. On a personal note, the Paideia Institute has a summer program in Rome and also a summer internship. And for the past, I guess, 5 or 6 years or so, I've known that Bernie and his team were up to something, and we've been talking and sort of following the progress. And so it's, I'm just so amazed and impressed at the quality of what they've been able to produce, and really excited to have an opportunity to tell the world about it here on Zoom. So with that, I will hand the Zoom speaking conch over to Professor Frischer. I think he's going to share his screen eventually, but Bernie, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you very much, Jason, for that nice introduction and for inviting me. And I see a lot of old friends who are here participating. So I hope all my old friends will chime in and ask a question or make a comment at the end. Many of you I haven't seen in a long time. I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles, where I'm a guest in a guest house, and I don't have the ideal setup. I didn't bring my expensive headset with me, so I apologize for any technical glitches or lack of things like audio quality, but I'll do my best. I'm going to give you some virtual field trips to ancient Rome and other places. And I'm going to, well, let me start by showing you the topics I will cover. I'm going to talk a little bit about our company, Flyover Zone. I'm going to give you some samplers of some of our virtual tours, especially those of ancient Roman sites, the Roman Forum from Rome itself. We have others in the city of Rome, but I'll just use that one as an example of what we have to offer. and 2 of our tours to Hadrian's villa. So let me start with the company. What is Flyover Zone? It's an employee-owned company based in Bloomington, Indiana, founded in 2016. And the mission is to create virtual tours to important cultural heritage sites around the world under the guidance of leading scholars. And special feature setting, we think, our tours apart from the typical Zoom tour that have become more and more in evidence because of COVID, are that, first of all, we not only take you on trips across space, but also back in time. We show you what we hope are accurate, scientifically based reconstructions of the heritage sites as they appeared more or less when new. And we also show you their current state today. Unlike a typical Zoom tour where the virtual tourist is in pretty much a passive position at most, the participant in a Zoom tour can ask a question in the chat box. Our tours really empower the virtual tourist to follow her curiosity around the virtual world, and I'll show you how that works. So you don't just sit back and listen to a guide explain things to you and show you essentially a slideshow, but you really move around at will through the site with the aid of a map that we give you on a virtual tablet. And at every point of interest where you may stop, you can either get some quick information about what you're seeing from a text on that tablet, or if you want a longer commentary, you can click on the audio button and listen to an expert explain to you the significance of what it is you're seeing. And of course, we have a website, and for much more information about the company, please check out our website, www.flyoverzone.com, Flyover Zone all written together. All right, well, let's start in with some sample tours, and all I can give you are samplers of the sample tours because these tours last anywhere from 75 minutes to 3 hours. So in the time available today, I'm going a little bit more for quantity than quality and giving you examples of 3, or if we have time, maybe 4 tours, and rather than just showing you one tour in great detail. And we'll start with what you see in the background behind me and what you saw also in Jason's background, Rome Reborn, the Roman Forum. And this tour has 50 stops at 50 points of interest. It has, as well as reconstruction of the Forum in approximately the year 320 CE. It has many time warps or panoramic shots from the same position, showing you what that point of interest looks like today. And we're very grateful to the Parco Archaeological for a permit to go into the Forum and shoot these panos before the general public was admitted. We also offer 4 free lesson plans. There are more in the works, but for now there are 4. These are standard based and probably will be more of interest to junior high and high school teachers than university instructors. But anyway, we offer them for free from our website. And we also offer the free scientific documentation, giving you the basis of the reconstructions that you see on the tour, monument by monument. And there's bibliography as well. So this document can also serve you if you're just teaching a course that touches on the Roman Forum, if you want to give your students a basic bibliography to get going with their own research papers. Well, let's go in, let's show you the sampler. I'll play this video.
Bernie, we're not getting sound. If you meant to have sound, you might have forgotten to check the box when you did share screen.
I always do that. You are absolutely right. I'm sorry. I will go back and do that properly. We think that. Wow! Welcome to the Roman Forum. The ancient Roman Forum. My name is Bernard Frischer. I am the director of the Rome Reborn project. The project has the mission of recreating in 3D the ancient city of Rome as it appeared at the peak of its urban development in approximately the year 320 AD. We think that at that time, the population of Rome was about 1 million people who lived and worked in about 7,000 buildings. A full experience of our virtual tour of the Roman Forum takes 3 hours. I'm afraid we only have 7 or 8 minutes today since we want to move on and see some other sites. So let me just show you the map that shows you many of the 50 stops on our tour. You can see if you read the white text as I pass my mouse over the blue dots, you can see what the stops are. What we're going to actually look at in some detail will be the Courier Yulia and the temple of the divine Julius Caesar. We are standing in front of Rome's Senate House, known as the Curia Julia. From earliest times, this was Rome's political center, and the Senate was part of a complex that included the Comitium, the place of public assembly. The original Curia was attributed by tradition to one of Rome's early kings, 500 years before Julius Caesar. Caesar's Curia, known as the Curia Julia, faced the old Roman Forum and also his new adjacent Forum of Caesar, which symbolized his supremacy in the state. The number of senators serving at any one time varied, but usually there were about 600. This building seems quite small compared to a modern parliament. It's only 82 feet by 57 feet in size. To become a senator, you had to be a citizen and be elected to a... And before we go inside, let's take advantage of being here to see a feature that Flyover Zone's users, I think, are most attached to, the time warp, where we can toggle between a view of the reconstruction of how we think things looked in antiquity and the exact same spot seen today. The interior of the Senate House is remarkably well preserved because the building was converted into a church in the Middle Ages. The interior of the Senate House was covered with plaques of marble, many fragments of which survive. The massive bronze doors were removed from the building in the 17th century and reused in the Basilica of St. John Lateran in another part of Rome. The Rome Reborn team was able to move them back here virtually. The long walls still feature 3 niches. Enough fragments of the original brightly colored floor marble mosaic survived that it was possible to create a physical restoration in modern times. Along the long sides of the hall are 3 shallow but deep steps on which the senators sat in 2 rows on each step. Modern calculations show that the seating capacity was about 400. The decorations of the building are noteworthy. We are told in an ancient source that, at least in its Augustan phase, 2 Greek paintings were displayed on the long walls. We do not know if these survived the fire of late antiquity, and in any case, we also do not know their exact design, so the Rome Reborn team has not included them in the digital restoration. 2 Toegate statues carved of porphyry in the 2nd century AD stood at the north end of the hall on the dais, where the Senate's presiding officers sat. Fragments of them can still be seen when you visit the building today, and the Rome Reborn team has restored them as the emperors Trajan and Hadrian. We know that there was a famous statue and altar of victory in the Senate House. It is likely that they also stood on the dais, where you see them in the digital restoration. Before you leave the interior of the Curia Julia, you might want to approach closer to them and learn more about their history and meaning to the Romans. We're now standing where we can get a good view of the temple that housed the cult of the divine Julius Caesar.
It was built on the site where the crowd attending his funeral burnt his corpse after the rousing funeral oration of Mark Antony. The temple was vowed in 42 BC and completed in 29. Today, only large fragments of the high podium survive. The superstructure has largely vanished, and it was hexastyle and prostyle. That is technical language meaning simply that it had 6 columns and a deep front porch. The Augustan architect Vitruvius adds another technical term to the description. It was pucna style, according to Vitruvius. Well, that just means that the 6 columns were set relatively close to each other. As well they might be. The site at the eastern end of the Forum Plaza is narrow, so room here was at a premium. In compensation, the site was very prestigious and quite appropriate as a place to honor Caesar. The temple stands just west of the intersection where the Sacred Way divides into 2 branches as it passes through the Roman Forum. On its backside, the building practically abuts the Regia, which was the headquarters of the Pontifex Maximus, or chief priest, of the Roman state religion. That was an office that Julius Caesar held for much of his adult life. Although the remains are scanty, we are fortunate in having a number of coins that depict the superstructure of the temple. They allow us to flesh out the Rome Reborn reconstruction. For example, we know from them that the front side of the temple podium had rostra, ship's prows, and historical sources indeed mention that until the late Imperial rostra was constructed in front of the temple of Julius Caesar did double duty as a rostra bookending the Augustan rostra on the opposite end of the Forum Plaza. The sources also tell us that the ship's prows were those captured by Augustus at the great sea battle of Actium. The coins show, too, that the pediment was decorated with a star, and we know that this symbolized the famous comet seen in the sky over Rome in the summer after Caesar's assassination. The comet was taken by Caesar's supporters as evidence that he had become a god after his death. So it is a very appropriate decoration for this temple, which houses Caesar's cult. Also appropriate is a final feature seen on some Roman coins. The cult statue inside the temple. Caesar was seen dressed as an augur, the priest responsible for interpreting the will of the gods. You can see the statue in the Rome Reborn reconstruction.
Well, the next tour that I want to show you a sample of is our tour from the Hadrian's Villa Reborn series, and it presents the South Theater. The South Theater is of interest for several reasons. Perhaps for me, the most important is that it's on private property, and I've, needless to say, worked at Hadrian's Villa for a long time, for many years. I put together a website you may be familiar with called the Digital Hadrian's Villa Project. And that required that I spend months out there over a 10-year period. But even people who spend a lot of time at the public archaeological park often do not know, and they don't have access to the surviving bits of the villa still on private property. One of those properties adjacent to the park is owned by the Bulgarini family, which has owned this piece of property. It's rather large since the 17th century, and they've been very proud over those centuries of the ruins, the standing ruins on their property. And some of the Bulgarini in previous centuries even wrote scholarly monographs or antiquarian essays about Hadrian's Villa. And it was on the Bulgarini property, for example, that the famous young and old centaur in the Vatican, in the Capitoline museums, were found in the so-called Academia part of the villa, which is part of the Bulgarini property. The South Theater is also part of the Bulgarini property. And so one of the nice things about our virtual tours is very often that we take you to places not open to the public, or places that may be open to the public, but we take you to parts that are not generally accessible by the public. I think of the Imperial apartments of the Domus Augustana on the Palatine, for example. You're not allowed into the standing ruins, and you're not allowed to descend down to see those apartments, but we were given permission and we're able to document them and include them in our tour of the Imperial Palace tour, which is coming next year, by the way. This tour has 15 stops and takes about 90 minutes. It has a number of time warps. It has a view of the whole villa, beautiful view, that we were able to shoot over the Bulgarini property using one of our drones. And the conceit that we use when we take you up in the air, in order that you don't feel uncomfortable just being suspended a few hundred feet off the ground, is we put you in a basket of a virtual hot air balloon. So it's as if you're floating securely high in the air over the site we want to present to you. And we have a nice panorama from a few hundred feet off the ground, showing you the whole villa, as you will see. This tour supports a feature called free roaming. That means that instead of simply teleporting from 360 Pano to 360 Pano, which is what we offer you right now in the Roman Forum tour, you can actually go into a mode where you can move around at will using your cursor keys to move forwards, backwards, and sideways. And this particular tour teaches you, of course, about the South Theater, but it also tells you some of the most important points about Roman theaters generally. And the tour also takes advantage of a lot of research that I have done through my university laboratories over the years. Taking advantage of that access, I got to the Bulgarini property to do remote sensing, to do GPR and ERT campaigns, and see, in virgoletti, in quotation marks, below the ground features that people like Piranesi saw in previous centuries, but that we don't see anymore exposed. So we have been able to confirm some of what Piranesi and other early antiquarians report about the villa. And we've also been able to work in a lot of crucial information from the manuscripts of Piero Ligorio, the 16th century architect antiquarian who wrote two long reports about Hadrian's villa, written during the period when he was designing and helping to build the nearby Villa d'Este in Tivoli. And these manuscripts have never been translated into English. So we make good use, we hope, of those. And once again, on our website, you can download the free scientific documentation that gives you the information and the reasoning behind the reconstructions you see.
Hello, I'm Bernard Frischer, director of the Hadrian's Villa Reborn project. We're visiting a very special place. It is not part of the public archaeological site of Hadrian's Villa, but stands on an adjacent private property. Today, it may not look like much, but as you will see, in Hadrian's day, it was a precious gem of art and architecture. If we just snap our fingers, we can use the magic of virtual reality to travel back in time to the year 138 AD and see the place as the ancient visitor did. Wow, quite a difference. So what is this place? Moderns call it the South Theater because it stands at the southern end of the built-up area of the villa. By the way, there was a second theater at the northern end of the villa, about 1.5 kilometers away. And yes, Hadrian's Villa was a very big place. Today, the South Theater is in a very ruinous condition, so to present it to you, we had to study the sources and integrate what they tell us to create the virtual reconstruction you are looking at. As the tour proceeds, we will talk a lot about the reasons behind our restorations. Compared to the big public theaters in Rome, which held 10,000 spectators or more, the South Theater is small. We estimate that at peak use, the number of high-ranking members of Hadrian's court at the villa numbered fewer than 1,000 people. Our theater is estimated to have had a capacity of between 1,100 and 1,300 spectators. So if small in comparison with a theater in the capital, the structure we are visiting was certainly big enough for the purpose it served. Before we finish this introduction, we should thank the Bulgarini family for permission to study and document the theater, which stands on property they have owned for centuries, since 1625 to be exact. Greek theaters tended to be built into hillsides. In contrast, Roman theaters were generally constructed on flat ground. The South Theater is clearly Roman in design. It is a freestanding structure situated on a relatively flat terrain. Let's delve into the design of a typical Roman theater and see how the architectural design of the South Theater at Hadrian's Villa conforms to the norms. You can follow my commentary by looking at the scene around you and also by studying the typical plan of a Roman theater on your virtual tablet. Characteristic of a Roman theater is an ornate stage building or scaenae frons faced with screens of columns 2 or 3 stories high. It is labeled A on the plan. Behind the facade, with those columns, were rooms for the actors to dress. 3 doorways connected the backstage corridor to the stage in front, so the actors could make entrances at 3 different positions. The South Theater, with its 2-story scaenae frons, is typically Roman. In front of the stage building was the stage, and in front of that, at a lower level, was the orchestra, labeled B on your plan. We've gone up into the air over our site to get a good view of the landscape, and be sure to look at the map of the area on your virtual tablet. Hadrian's Villa is located about 25 kilometers east of Rome at Tivoli, that hill town you see in the distance. Below your feet are the ruins of the villa today. Hadrian's estate is one of the best preserved elite Roman villas. It is also one of the largest.
Hadrian is one of the most successful of the Roman emperors. After a period of renewed wars of expansion under Trajan, Hadrian puts the brakes back on. He goes back to the policy of Tiberius. And no emperor did more than Hadrian to try to set up physical boundaries around the empire. He built a wall, a wooden wall in Germany, which doesn't survive, and very famously built a stone wall in Britain, Hadrian's Wall, parts of which can still be very dramatically seen today. He wanted to make the point that Rome was a satiated power and it was not going to expand militarily. He also, as emperor, travels around the empire. No emperor had traveled as much as this since Augustus.
Since the structure we're visiting is primarily a theater, you might be surprised to see this small round temple located at the end of the main axis overlooking the seating and the stage. In fact, we know that there was a category of Roman theater that had such temples. Scholars call sites in the category theater temples. The American scholar John Arthur Hansen published a classic monograph about the category in 1959. He begins by noting that the presence of temples in so many Roman theaters is not strange if we recall the religious origin of Roman theatrical performances during the Republic, and the fact that for a long time before there were permanent theaters, plays were performed in front of temples. Even when the first permanent theater was built in Rome, Pompey's great theater in the southern Campus Martius, it had a major temple on top of the seats at the end of the main axis, and it had several other smaller shrines as well. Hansen went on to catalog over 20 other examples around the empire. Among them, he mentions our example here at Hadrian's Villa. From the remains we see today, it is not clear to which deity this temple was dedicated. In the 19th century, Sebastiani suggested it housed a cult of Apollo, but since we know of only one statue of Apollo in the theater, the one on the Scaenae fronds, there is no particular reason to think of Apollo here. Fortunately, we do not have to rely on mere speculation. Once again, Piero Ligorio comes to the rescue with a written account dating to the 16th century that fills in the missing details. In a manuscript now in Turin, he wrote, "Inside the temple, in another pit, were found the foot of a statue of Hercules, and to the left and right of him were two other images, a Minerva and a Clio. The statues were destroyed by the barbarians, but their names were written on bases." Thus Ligorio. So the central figure was Hercules, and it was undoubtedly to him that the temple was dedicated. Granted that we tend to think of Hercules as the muscular hero out in the wild, slaying monsters, finding him here in the company of Minerva and Clio is not all that surprising. First, let us note that in his comprehensive study of Roman theaters, Sear cataloged several Roman theaters with temples dedicated to Hercules. The most striking parallel was just down the road in the suburban temple of Hercules Victor near the hill town of Tivoli. If you click on Time Warp under Related Information, you can see that our little rotunda is fairly well preserved and has been surveyed several times, making it possible for Matthew Brennan, our talented 3D modeler, to restore it digitally with some confidence. We even have some good evidence about the pavement. The wall surfaces have been restored in a hypothetical way with the use of typical designs and marble revetment. Regarding the statues you see in the center of the room, they reflect Piero Ligorio's report that there were 3 statues here: Hercules flanked by Clio and Athena, or Minerva, as Piero calls her. Each of these figures was depicted by various statue types in Greek and Roman art. Since the statues were destroyed, as Ligorio puts it, by the barbarians, we cannot be certain which types to use. So what you see is correct as to the 3 deities depicted and to Hercules' central position, but the details of the pose, expression, and surface finish of the statues are purely speculative. You may be interested in knowing that to create the Hercules, our talented art director Mohammed Abdelaziz was inspired by a Roman coin. You can see it if you click on the word coin on your tablet. On one side, it illustrates the lost cult statue of Hercules in the round temple of Hercules and the Muses in Rome. In our reconstruction, as on the coin, the hero is shown nude, wearing the skin of the Nemean lion on his head. The lion's pelt flows dynamically behind his back, where you can even see its tail. Hercules has put down his famous club, which rests against his left knee. Note the dynamic torsion of his body as he turns to hold a lyre, which symbolizes his role here as leader of the Muses. The head type of our reconstruction is taken from the Lansdowne Hercules, which was found at Hadrian's Villa. We have gilded the statue except for Hercules' club and lyre, which are highlighted in silver. Up to now in the Roman Forum tour and in this tour, you've seen us teleport from point to point. When we arrive at a point of interest, we are kind of locked in place. We're looking at a 360 panorama. When we switch into free roam mode, we can actually move wherever we want around the scene, as you are seeing now.
And free roam is something that we're implementing across all of our existing tours and that we will always be offering going forward. The nice thing about it is that it allows you to get exactly the view that you require, and it actually empowers you, if you are a teacher, to use our tours as your own resources that you can use in your own way. You can provide the commentary. You don't have to click the audio button. You don't even have to turn on the virtual tablet. You can just create your own tour and make your own comments, projecting from your laptop in your classroom so your students can see it. The next tour that I want to show you some samples of is Hadrian's Villa Reborn, the Stadium Garden. This tour has 12 stops with about 75 minutes of content. It includes a description of how the Roman elite pursued otium at their country estates, and especially devotes a lot of attention to the custom of the ambulatio, or the passeggiata, the walk, often taken after the midday meal. There's a lot of sculpture that is known to have come from the so-called Stadium Garden. This includes the Niobid statue group that we think was erected in the South Nymphaeum in the Stadium Garden. The sculpture gallery in the North Hall that if Hofmann's theory, Adolf Hofmann wrote the great architectural historical monograph on the Stadium Garden, published by the German Archaeological Institute in 1980. If Hofmann's theory is correct, this would be the only sculpture gallery known at Hadrian's Villa. Of course, there was a lot of sculpture all over Hadrian's Villa, used as a decorative element in the different spaces. But the North Hall would be a sculpture gallery per se, a kind of museum. And there are a lot of other sculptures in the colonnades and in the Imperial triclinium. I see that Anne Koloski-Ostro is here, and I am now regretting that in the interest of time, I cut the visit to Hadrian's personal toilet, a one-holer, where I actually mentioned her great book on Roman sanitation and toilets. And I'm sorry now that I did, but thank you, Anne, for that, for all the research you've done on that topic, which we certainly benefited from here. But I, alas, cut that. I had to cut that from the sampler, but it's there if you're interested. And one thing that really became very clear to me as I put this together was the importance of artificial lighting. And this so-called Stadium Garden was really an entertainment complex used in warm weather, we think, and probably used for imperial audiences during the day and banquets at night. And that brings up the question of how people saw and were able to safely move around this large area at night without stumbling and falling. And of course, the answer is artificial illumination. Research showed that this is a topic that has barely been touched by scholars, and where we think that 3D modeling has a lot to offer. And so we, consulting with the professor of lighting in the Indiana University School of Drama, were able to restore the artificial torchlight around the complex. And we think that it's especially relevant to the viewing of sculpture, because in the flickering light of a torch or a candelabrum, the sculpture seems to almost become animated as the light and shadow moves across the surface of the statue. The statues seem to move. This is something that in modern times is well known and documented. In the age of the Grand Tour, the aristocrats would go into the Vatican Museum at night with their servants holding torches and enjoy the Laocoon statue group seeming to jump around, trying to escape those serpents, trying to kill them all. And that is documented. We don't have any such documentation in antiquity, but surely the ancients noticed the same effect. And I will show you what that might have looked like. So we actually offer two 360 videos at night. So 360 video in contrast to 360 pano, it's a moving image. And you'll see that this allows us to give you a sense of the effect of artificial illumination on sculpture.
Welcome to Hadrian's Villa. My name's Bernard Frischer, the director of the Digital Hadrian's Villa project. The feature we are visiting has the modern name Stadium Garden. Let's begin by noting that the name predates the excavations of the 1950s, when much new evidence came to light that made it very clear that this part of the villa was neither a stadium nor a garden. If Hofmann was right in thinking that the South Hall was not used for dining, how might it have been used? We think that it was one of several venues of the villa where imperial audiences and receptions could take place. Others could serve in cold weather, but given its design, the South Hall was especially suited to the task in warm weather. For this reason, we have illustrated a small audience in the scene before you. Hadrian is seated on an impressive throne. Next to him is a bodyguard, a soldier from the Praetorian Guard. In line, waiting to see the emperor, are a small number of people who have reached this point in their visit to the villa, the climactic moment when they can present their business to the emperor himself. They may have come from any corner of the vast Roman Empire. Their business may be to represent a city or a province, thanking the emperor for a benefaction received, or making the case for the gift of money for a public facility like an aqueduct, theater, or temple. Hadrian was very receptive to such requests, and as Mary Boatwright has shown, he spent lavishly on public works all over the empire. Others represent only themselves. They may be litigants in a law case, making an appeal to the emperor, who was, in effect, the one and only judge of Rome's Supreme Court. Or they might be newly arrived guests here to perform a service for the emperor, such as a sculptor, chef, speechwriter, or actor. At an imperial audience like the one we are witnessing today, Hadrian might have had to interact with several dozen such people of all stripes and standing. On either side of the emperor, we have placed two statues. What are they, and what are they doing here? Our great 16th century informant, Piero Ligorio, reported that he saw a statue of Artemis with a deer in a room that had columns topped by capitals of Biggio Morato. As you can see, this is exactly how Hofmann and we, following him, have reconstructed the interior of the South Hall. Eugenia Prinasalsa Ricotti perceptively noted that this is in fact the only room in the villa known to have had capitals in this dark gray marble. The statue of Artemis hunting with a deer is known as the Versailles type, and such a statue stood in the nearby Villa d'Este until it was given to the Capitoline Museums in the 18th century. Many, but not all, of the ancient statues in the nearby Villa d'Este are thought to have come from Hadrian's villa. When Ligorio was studying Hadrian's villa, he was also designing and decorating the gardens of the Villa d'Este. It would not have been at all surprising to find a statue of Artemis in the South Hall, especially if it was in visual communication with the great Nymphaeum, so easily seen from here. Why? The Nymphaeum features a group of 16 statues illustrating the tragic story of Niobid and her 14 children. You can find out more about the statues and the story at stop 3 on this tour. Niobe was the daughter of Tantalus, the king of a city at the foot of Mount Sipylus in modern-day Western Turkey. Tantalus is the eponymous mythical figure behind our English verb to tantalize. Niobe's life was not off to a good start. Things improved, though, when she married Amphion, the son of Zeus and Antiope, and a twin brother of Zethus. Amphion and Zethus built the walls of the city of Thebes in Greece. The story of what happened next was told by a number of ancient writers. Aeschylus and Sophocles wrote lost plays on the theme. The best preserved account is to be found in the Augustan poet Ovid. In his Metamorphoses, he recounts how one day Niobe saw the women of Thebes preparing to worship the goddess Leto. Reacting with anger and jealousy, she harangued the women and claimed to be more worthy of honor than Leto for several reasons, including the fact that whereas Leto only had 2 children, she, Niobe, had 14, 7 daughters and 7 sons. Leto, of course, being a goddess, heard these insulting words and expressed her outrage to her children, the famous archers Apollo and Artemis. They told her to complain no more, and joined by Artemis, Apollo hurried off to slay the sons of Niobe, who were engaging in sports outside town. When their father Amphion learned what had happened, he committed suicide. When word of all this was brought to Niobe, she compounded her mistake by boasting again that she was still greater than Leto, since she still had her 7 daughters. Artemis and Apollo then finished the bloody business of dispatching all of the children of Niobe by killing the daughters, who were already dressed in black clothes to mourn their dead brothers and father. Finally, according to Ovid, only the youngest daughter was left, and Niobe, who was witnessing the attack on her daughters, begged the gods for mercy by sparing at least this one child, but all to no avail. Once the gods had exacted their vengeance, Niobe was struck with grief and could do nothing but weep. The end of the story was her transformation or metamorphosis into a rock, which was miraculously flown from Thebes back to a mountain near her hometown across the Aegean. Now it is time to say something about how we might interpret the Niobid statue group. Let's start with an interpretation of what exactly we are witnessing. If we recall the passage in Ovid's Metamorphoses recounting the story of Niobe, we know that first her sons were killed and her husband committed suicide. Next, her daughters put on black clothes of mourning, and Niobe foolishly boasted that she was still superior to Leto. At that point, the daughters are killed. At the story's end, Niobe, after weeping inconsolably for a long time, has been transformed into an eternally weeping rock on Mount Sipylus. Here, in contrast, we see both the sons and daughters killed at the same time, and everyone is already wearing black and has been converted to rock. This is, after all, a sculptural group. Niobe's tears take the form of all that water flowing down the stepped cascades of the Nymphaeum. Likewise, the gestures of the figures and the expressions on their faces run the gamut from initial confusion and incomprehension as the attack starts, to the pain and anguish of the final moments of life of the mortally wounded, to the calmness of death for the dead lying prone with their eyes still open to the sky, and finally to the desperation of the mother looking heavenward, seeking the salvation of her youngest daughter. In other words, the sculptor has brilliantly taken a story that a poet like Ovid could spin out in words over several hundred lines in step-by-step fashion, and the sculptor has collapsed the story into an instant. But the instant is not outside time, but compresses and expresses all the time of the story at once, past, present, and future. To be sure, this compression sometimes results in features that might be considered illogical, at least if we approach the statues with Ovid in mind. For example, here the sons as well as the daughters wear black clothing, whereas in Ovid the daughters only don black clothes when they have to mourn the deaths of their brothers. Of course, the sculptor was not obliged to illustrate Ovid's version of the story, but had the artistic license to invent his own variant. This group attests the limits of sculpture to be a narrative storytelling art. I think it fair to claim that it passes that test with flying colors. We are standing inside the North Hall, a building with two distinct rooms. Hofmann classifies the two as oiki, that is, an impressive room in a Roman residence used for formal events. Each represents a different variety of the general room type. The oikos we are in can be considered the vestibule of the North Hall. It is just off the central plaza, and so would have been the major entrance into this building. It has a barrel-vaulted ceiling starting at a height of almost 9 meters or 29 feet off the floor. We are now in the second oikos, or formal room of the North Hall. The ceiling is about 10 meters or 33 feet off the floor. In contrast to the vestibule, which has colonnades along the sides, this room has none, and so is wider. The usable space is nevertheless reduced by the presence of an impluvium, or water basin, in the middle of the room. Its presence allowed Hofmann to infer that there was also a compluvium, or big skylight, overhead. The purpose of the impluvium basin is to collect any rainwater entering through the skylight, which will not have been glassed over. The purpose of the skylight was to let plenty of light stream into the room, and additional light entered through the windows on 2 levels along the sides of the room. Clearly, as can also be seen in the South Hall, which you visit at stop 4 on this tour, the room could have been very breezy and comfortable, even in the heat of summer. So the room must have been a very comfortable place to visit and to tarry in, even on hot days. To tarry, for what purpose? This concern with lighting and cooling the space and the presence of bases along the walls suggested to Hofmann that this part of the North Hall was a sculpture gallery. We agree with this genial idea, and as you see, we have placed statues here. We might note that, if Hofmann is right, this will be the only such sculpture gallery known at the villa, which, to be sure, was filled with many statues. But normally, inside the rooms of the villa, they were simply decorative elements and not the sole focus of attention, as they are in a sculpture gallery. Here, as you can see, they are very much the center of attention as we enter the space and begin to look around. Since we do not know what sculpture was displayed here, we have limited ourselves to statues known to have come from Hadrian's villa, but which were found either in the Villa d'Este or outside their ancient contexts in areas in and around Hadrian's villa. We're standing in front of a colossal pair of statues that has the modern name the Pasquino group, after a fragment still in a public place in Rome on and around which the Romans for centuries have posted pasquinades, or satirical poems ridiculing their political leaders. The identification of the figures has been much debated, but we agree with those who interpret the fallen figure as Patroclus, the comrade in arms of Achilles in the Trojan War. If correct, the sculpture refers to books 17 and 18 of the Iliad, where Menelaus, and later after Menelaus retreated, Achilles, with the help of other Greek troops, rescued the corpse of Patroclus from the Trojans after the Trojan prince Hector had slain him and taken away the armor Patroclus had been wearing. This was not just any armor, but that which the gods gave to Achilles' father on his wedding day to the goddess Thetis, Achilles' mother. So its absence represents a significant loss. And Patroclus was not just any warrior, but the one Achilles called my dear companion, whom I loved beyond all my other companions, as well as my own life. The figure lying prone is Endymion, a character known from Greek mythology. We know that this statue, now in Stockholm, was found out of context at Hadrian's villa in the substructure of the Poikile, known as the Cento Camarelle, where other statues and some despoiled marbles were found in modern times. Gabelman thinks that for once we have to do here not with a Roman copy of a lost Greek original, but a genuine creation of the Hadrianic period. Be that as it may, in art the theme of Endymion goes back to the classical period, when at Olympia a statue of him is attested. It was very possibly chryselephantined, that is made out of ivory and gold. The myth also appears in various media of Roman art, including wall paintings, mosaics, gems, and sarcophagi. The wall paintings are useful for our restoration, telling us, for example, the color of his hair, which was light brown. In ancient mythology, a goddess who is sometimes Artemis, and in other variants the moon goddess Selene, fell in love with the handsome shepherd Endymion. He often slept on a mountainside, and the goddess in passing by would stop to kiss him without rousing him from sleep. Once she begged Zeus to bestow on him eternal youth and eternal sleep. Her wish was granted, so this statue too, like some of the others in the gallery, has a strong erotic element, both in terms of its backstory as well as its provocative pose with legs splayed and near complete nudity. In particular, the theme of sleep, so central here, also plays a big role in the tale of Cupid and Psyche. Of course, the eternal sleep of Endymion is also easy to relate to death, and in Greek, to sleep the sleep of Endymion was proverbial for being dead, and so it is not surprising that the sleeping Endymion is also a theme on Roman sarcophagi. The Endymion brings to mind another Hadrianic statue depicting a nude, sleeping young man with legs spread apart, the lovely Barberini faun, now in Munich, and found in the area of Hadrian's mausoleum in Rome. If you click the arrow on your tablet, you can see a picture of it. Now, prepare yourself for a treat. I hope you agree that the complex is beautiful and filled with remarkable works of art as seen in the daylight. But now that we have come to the Imperial dining room, the hour has shifted to night. As the light dims, the slaves light the torches and candelabra that make it possible for the dinner guests to safely get up and leave to return to their rooms at the end of the evening. But the artificial illumination undoubtedly served another purpose as well, to create what we can, without exaggeration, call a magical, enchanting atmosphere. We have turned left into the colonnade of the garden peristyle, just outside the dining room. Now we have turned to the right. We have gone between the columns to the gravel pathway through the peristyle garden. Be sure to look around and savor the play of light and shadow from the torches, candelabra, and lamps hanging from the ceilings of the surrounding peristyle. We've proceeded into the North Hall and its sculpture gallery. Now we're in the vestibule or entrance area of the North Hall. We have left the North Hall and are now passing through the central plaza, from which we can eventually exit to return to our bedroom elsewhere in the villa. But first, let's not leave quite yet. We haven't seen the South Hall and the nearby South Nymphaeum. We have entered the South Hall, now quiet after the hustle and bustle of the day's Imperial audience. In the distance, we can make out the Nymphaeum with its Niobid statue group. We are standing at the south end of the South Hall, where we get a nice view of the statues of Artemis and Apollo, bookending our view of the Niobid statue group beyond. We have stepped out of the South Hall onto the plaza of the South Nymphaeum, where the torches and candelabra make it possible to see the water channels, the artificial grotto, and the 16 Niobid statues. If you turn around, you will see that Hadrian and several others are also out here with you to enjoy the view. Perhaps sitting out here on a warm summer's evening after a delicious meal was their final pleasant diversion before calling it a night. Once again, we invite you to click on the video under related information to see the effect of this flickering artificial light on the statues. See if you agree with me that the play of light and shadow across the surfaces of the sculptures seems almost to animate them, to bring them back to life. Don't forget to turn around to see Hadrian enjoying the view with you as he converses with a friend.
Sed ad asimilia per apud nationes quae vidam opera os Caesares minum deorum laterale non tantum sed ad asimilia per apud nationes quae vidam opera os Caesares minum deorum laterale non tantum.
Well, there's a lot more. We discuss every single statue and fresco that you saw there, but obviously time today does not permit a detailed look. I was going to show you a little bit of our latest release, Baalbek Reborn, The Temples, but I see it's already past the hour that was allotted me, and we haven't even gotten to the Q&A, so I will skip this. But I will point out that thanks to the generosity of a sponsor, unlike our other tours, which cost a few dollars, from $1.99 to $19.99. By the way, they're all on sale for 50% off right now. This one is we give away free, and you can download it at flyoverzone.org, the ORG extension we use when we give things away at no cost, which we're always happy to do if we can find a sponsor. Let me just conclude by telling you what's coming next. First of all, we've signed an agreement with the Naples Archaeological Museum. We'll be digitizing for them the Farnese collection and then putting the 23 sculptures from the Baths of Caracalla back into the Baths of Caracalla as a highlight of the virtual tour that we are planning to put out by the end of this year, early next year. We're working on a number of sites in Egypt, including the Valley of the Kings. The tomb of Ramses VI will be out by the end of the year. We're working on Mexico Reborn, a number of sites there. We'll have Tenochtitlan available by the end of the year. That's the Aztec capital that was conquered by Cortez. We're working on Athens Reborn with Jennifer Niles, currently the director of the American School at Athens. And we invite you to follow us on FaceTime, Instagram, and Twitter, where you can find notices of the release of these products and other company news. Thank you again for the invitation to speak to you today. And if there is any time left, I'd be happy to answer your questions or respond to your comments. So thank you.
Thanks, Bernie. That was fantastic. I didn't know about all of this other stuff. I knew it existed, but I had only ever seen the forum, and it's really amazing the level of detail and beauty, and I think the people talking in Latin was it's a pretty nice touch, for instance.
Those are some famous people. There's a D'Ancleto Pavanetto and Luigi Moralia, actually, who did a recording for me about 10 years ago. Luigi was not so famous back then, but he's come to be. D'Ancleto, of course, the editor of Latinitas, was very famous, very learned man.
Well, we're certainly, you've kept people's attention, Bernie, for the whole hour, and there's still a good sized group here. So I imagine people have questions. I'm just gonna There's been some coming in the chat, which I'm going to get to first. And then if we exhaust those and people still have more, they can ask them live. So the first one is, what software is used to create the models?
There's a lot that is used. If the object exists, say a statue, and we do have on our company website over 300 models of sculptures that you can use for free at any time. We use photogrammetry to capture the data. So we take photographs all the way around them. Typically for a life-size statue, you might take 300 to 500 statues. We then process them in either Agisoft Metashape or in capturing reality. Then you have to edit the result, which will be pretty good, but needs to be fixed up. And we use ZBrush for that. We also use ZBrush to restore the statue because we're not so much interested in the state, having a state model of the statue today, but that's just a point of departure to make a very accurate restoration. And we use ZBrush also for that purpose. When it comes to architecture and the landscape, we use AutoCAD and then 3D Studio Max. And for the rendering, we use V-Ray. And then in order to integrate all of the information, whether it's even audio, textual, the 3D models and whatnot, right now we use Unity, but we have a project underway to switch over to the Unreal Engine by the end of the year. We may actually use both because they have complementary features. But anyway, in a nutshell, that's the main software that we use.
Thanks a lot for people who understand.
And if you want to learn about how to use it, get into my doctoral program at Indiana University. We teach you how to use it, and we teach you how to think about this and how to pursue this, applying the tried and true principles of architectural and artistic restoration. And then also to use these restorations as points of departure for empirical research, or what I call empirical research supported by computer simulations, as is totally common across the sciences, whether it's biology, astronomy, chemistry, or physics. Now we can do the same kinds of experiments and recreate experiences in the humanities using the techniques of virtual heritage. So the point of virtual heritage is not simply to digitize things and restore things, but that's just step one, to allow us to go back in time and run experiments and see things that we wouldn't otherwise see and have insights that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Great, thanks. The next question is, what are your plans for VR platforms like Oculus?
So I didn't mention the platforms that we publish to, but they include everything from smartphones, iPhone, Android, and iOS, and tablets, to PCs and laptops, Windows 10 and Mac. And we do support already the Oculus and HTC Vive. In fact, we have just signed an agreement with Vive on May 17th, I believe. They're going to bundle Rome Reborn on every Vive Focus sold. So if you get a Vive Focus, you're ready to go with at least Rome Reborn. I think the question might have been about the Oculus Quest, the new Oculus, which we don't support in the stores. All of our software runs on the Quest, but for a variety of reasons I won't go into, we haven't released them on that platform. We will by the end of the year, though, be also on the Quest without any doubt. Everything works on the Quest. We just haven't gotten around to releasing those things.
I have an Oculus Rift, which is wireless, and I was thinking as you were showing the scene where you were walking through that hallway in Hadrian's villa and toggling back and forth between the current and modern, how amazing it would be if you could actually walk around an archaeological site with a headset on and pop it on to sort of go into the ancient version. So maybe that'll happen someday.
No, it already has happened. I mean, if you have an Oculus Rift, I think everything that we have published is available for the Rift, so you can already do that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, when they let me back into Italy, I'll have to try it. All right. The next question is asking if, let's see. Do you know anything about the Giza project, Harvard's Giza project? And
I know. By the way, here's my iPhone. I'm loading up the Roman Forum app. When it loads, I'll show you just to prove that I'm not making this up. Yeah, there we go.
Wow. Welcome to the Roman Forum.
So anyway, the Giza project, yeah, Peter Manuelian, old friend of mine. I love the Giza project. We have two of our master students working with him at Harvard right now. It's a great project. I completely support it and admire it, bow down to it. And what else can I tell you? We're doing Giza. We're doing it with the director of Giza. We have a very good relationship with the Ministry of Culture of Egypt. And so we work with directors of various sites like Karnak, Sinai, and Giza to put together our virtual tours. And we call our presentations on Egypt, we tend not to call them Egypt Reborns, but Egypt Great Monuments. Great Monuments versus Reborns. The monuments are well enough preserved, we don't have to reconstruct them. We can just show you the way they are today, as the case with Ramses VI in the Valley of the Kings. Very well preserved, no need to, I mean, you could digitally restore it, take it to the next level of completeness, but it's already largely there. Certainly the pyramids, the Giza Plateau are there, and the Sphinx, we can take you there without further ado. So we can't possibly compete against Peter, who's been doing the Giza project for like 20 years. Nor with the Theban mapping project of Ken Weeks, which is fantastic, and we use it for our research and everything, but highly recommend that scholarly resource too. That now RC has, they've updated the website, which was authored in Flash and was kind of not working very well for a few years, but now it's just been relaunched, I'm happy to say. So you can use the Theban mapping project again without any problem.
Bernie, the next question is from Anne Kolaski-Ostro, who's curious about when you're going to do this for Pompeii and Herculaneum.
Well, the director, Paolo Giulierini, director of the Naples Archaeological Museum, has who's a partner for the Basit Caracalla, and said when we're done with that, just a few days ago, please do the Villa of the Papyri. So we want to do the Villa of the Papyri and hope to do the Villa of the Papyri. So that'll be our first example of something at Herculaneum. We have a major sponsor who can't wait for us to do Pompeii, and last night he told me at dinner, I'm in one of his guest houses here in LA, Ephesus. So he wants us to do Pompeii. One of my graduate students, Kelly McClinton, who just got her PhD in virtual heritages and off to Oxford for her second PhD in classical archaeology, as soon as she can get her visa, is working on Pompeii and has digitized and made a SQL database of the great documentation of Pompeii put together by Tatiana Varscher. It's in unpublished form in manuscripts of the American Academy in Rome Library and the German Archaeological Institute in Rome. And so we've got those, that resource and many other things for Pompeii. And we will do Pompeii in the next year or two. We'll start on that for sure. So very much on our radar screen and on our bucket list of things to do.
Great. A couple more questions in the chat here. So one is about the sculptures of naked people, such as Endymion. What went into the decision to have the sculptures more in actual skin tone rather than stone tone?
Good question. I thought somebody was going to ask about the pubic hair, which got us banned on the Buy platform in the Steam store for kids, which is too bad because we think that the education market, especially K-12, is very big for us, very important. We put the pubic hair in when indicated by the physical remains of sculpted pubic hair. And John Herman, the retired curator of antiquities at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, is one of our consultants for sculpture, and he's very obsessed about getting the pubic hair right. Endymion didn't have pubic hair, which bothered me, and I asked John, could that be one of these cases that Mark Abbey calls a great American polychromy expert, structure from paint, where, okay, the strands of hair were not sculpted, but you saw them through paint. And John said, no, he's a kouros, he's a youth, and he didn't have any pubic hair, so leave him that way. Anyway, the skin tones, yes. So I mentioned polychromy, and right from the beginning, I've been a participant and adherent of what used to be called the Copenhagen Polychromy Network, started by Jan Ostergaard in the late 2000s. And we firm believers that most Greek and Roman white marble sculpture was painted realistically. And so, and of course, a lot of study has been done on finding traces of polychromy. The great impetus to do that started about 20 years ago with the development of some non-invasive techniques, which my lab at Indiana University is able to do, whether it's UV, VIL, or XRF. We have the equipment, we have the know-how to do that. And our project with the Naples Archaeological Museum is being done in connection with their polychromy project called the MON, which is the acronym in Italian for the museum, MON in color. At any rate, yeah, we think that white marble was normally painted and painted as realistically as possible. So that's what we strive to do. And we certainly, when we have the exact evidence from a scientific study of polychromy, we like say the Augusta Suprema Porta, one of the more studied statues, or the Amazon Mate type, we respect the results that is put forth. But as Ostergaard says, we're only at the beginning of the beginning in polychromy studies. Not even 1% of everything that needs to be studied has been. So we must resort to hypotheses of restoration when it comes to color, and we just assume. And that's where, as I mentioned with Endymion with his hair, the vase paintings can be very helpful, or frescoes, for example, for the muses from the estate of Yulia Felix at Pompeii. We have the cycle of the muses now in the Louvre that show us the coloring of the muses, and we use that whenever possible. So we argue by analogy in our restorations of polychromy, but we do think it's better to restore the color than not to restore. Our position is that you might think it's more conservative and safe just to leave the white marble. But I think that would mean to certainly be 100% wrong. If you restore the color, at least you have, say, a fighting chance of being right, maybe a 50% chance of being right. You won't be 100% right in detail, but you certainly will give people the idea these things were painted, which we want to do.
The next question is about, I'm just looking through the chat here. Will you ever offer like a subscription model so that you can pay a monthly fee to have access to all of them rather than just buy them one at a time?
Absolutely. In fact, I don't know, maybe this, my CEO will kill me, but by the end of the year, perhaps by November, if the 5 developers we have on our team meet their deadline and get their bonuses, we will have a complete remake of everything we're doing. We'll have remastered all the existing tours, added those tours I mentioned, and present them to you not by download, executables downloaded from a store like Oculus, but streaming from the cloud and with a subscription model. And we're thinking, and I'd love to have your feedback, $2.99 a month for everything, or $19.99 for a year. Seems reasonable to me. If you look at these Zoom tours, virtual tours, they typically are charging $20 to $50 these days, and that's for a 1 hour, 90-minute tour that you see one time and then they disappear. We'll give you everything we have for $19.99 for a year, and right now that's 8 tours, and when we actually release the subscription service and the streaming service at the end of the year, it'll be about 12 tours, and we'll guarantee at least 4 new tours per year going forward. Does $19.99 seem too much for that? What is the reaction of the audience?
To me, it seems like a steal.
Oh, good. Yeah. But we don't know. We're not business people. That's our problem. So far, we're succeeding in losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Really, we're very far from even breaking even. And so we are experimenting in all kinds of directions, trying to figure out how to find our way to the marketplace and to the sweet spot of what people are interested in and willing to pay.
Here's a more historically oriented question. What do we know about public access in antiquity to shrines and temples, such as the South Theater Shrine to Hercules that we now tour in detail? So could people get in there, or did you have to have an appointment?
I mean, the default is that the doors that, worship, of course, pagan, quote unquote, worship was outdoors in front of the temple, not inside the cella. The cella was to protect and house the cult statue. The cult statue normally was not seen. It was safely locked up behind closed doors, opened on the festival day, the Dies Natalis of the temple. That's what we think. And so, yeah, when you could see the cult statues on the festival day for sure, just by appearing at the rites outside, and perhaps after the rites, the doors were left open and you could go inside and circulate around on that day. And temples did have keepers, and perhaps you could turn to the keeper, make an appointment, and get in any day. But some of them, like the Temple of Aphrodite, where the famous Aphrodite of Praxiteles was displayed on Cnidos, we have records that men would sneak inside and stay inside after closure and then make love to the statue. So apparently that one anyway was open. It was a great sight, a sightseeing attraction. That may have been special though as a sightseeing attraction, and the Cnidians may have kept it open more days of the year than the normal temple. In Rome, for example, where we know of 80 temples, perhaps the average one was not normally open except for on the festival day. But I don't know. But we have great experts here. I see Professor Gruen is here, for example. Do you have anything to add to that, Eric, if you're still here? Or anyone else who may know more about Roman religion than I do.
If as people gather their thoughts, I'll just I'll proceed. There's another interesting question, which is that do you have any kind of organized project, Bernie, to bring this to schools?
We I don't know what organized. I'm not a very organized person. So we have scattershot ways of doing it, especially by just donating our apps. We donated 50 Rome Reborn apps to the wonderful UK initiative Keeping Classics Alive. I hope everybody here is a member and supporter. And we have donated many Oculus headsets to schools and universities. Now that when we first came out in 2018, we were only on the VR headsets. Then in the last 2 years, we've been on everything from PCs and smartphones on up. So we're happy to donate free copies to instructors. And that's about the only thing I can say, because we're a very small company, and I would love to have maybe a proselytizer who would go just be as a full-time job, go around to different schools, middle schools, high schools, universities, and every day of the week give free demonstrations, free virtual tours. We could do it by Zoom, of course, and we will be starting to offer Zoom tours ourselves in June. Those are going to be on the weekends. Again, if you sign up to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you can, or if you look on our website at the calendar, you can take one of the Zoom tours, and we can get into your classroom that way if you wish.
Yeah, I'll just suggest, I work with another digital humanities project, which I'll just plug here in the chat, called alphaeus.net, which is a wonderful browser-based Greek and Latin dictionary. I'm on the board there. And what they did was they set up an advisory board of high school teachers who they sort of meet with regularly, who use their content and explore ways to sort of incorporate it into the classroom and also get it into the curriculum. So that might be something worth considering. Just
good idea. Yeah, we have some high school and middle school teachers working for us to write the lesson plans, but we don't have we have an advisory board of them. That's a great idea. I took a note of that. So
good. There's been a lot of other interesting comments and lots of just exclamations of amazement and praise in the chat. So I'll send it to you, Bernie.
Oh, thank you.
Probably review it.
Thank you.
so you could see some of the other comments that we didn't treat here live. Does anyone else have anything that they'd like to say, either live themselves, or make a comment, or say hi, or anything like that before we sign off?
Hi, Anne. Anne, say something to me.
Go ahead, Anne. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Yes. Oh, it's so great to see you and see many other old friends too. Bernie, I just want to encourage you, since you really are in the process of advertising these wonderful tours, and as you make new ones, that there's a level of the classical studies meetings, that is the middle school, high school meetings, like the Massachusetts Classical Association, or that is every state has a high school Latin teacher level of contact. And those people seem like a really rich audience for this. And their schools sometimes have significant money to be able to do a subscription and bring in some, and especially virtual things, which their kids love. This is the age of virtuality, of course, and something like this will attract the high school and middle school kids even faster than it will attract the university students. And it's really high-end scholarship that's excellent. So, I mean, I do a lot of that kind of advertising. I'm certainly happy when I'm going around New England talking to high schools, or going to the Massachusetts Classical Association, or the CANE meeting, the Classical Association of New England. And then there's the Classical Association of the Midwest and the Atlantic states, where a lot of high school teachers come. And if you could get some volunteers among your friends to show a demonstration at those meetings and have sign-up sheets, I think you could greatly expand an interested buyer audience.
Thank you. That is an excellent idea. And I would just say, probably among the 40-some people still present, there may be people who participate in such meetings. If anybody wants to pick up on this idea, we can pay you to go, and we could train you in how to use the tours, and give you free copies for your own use. And then all we would ask is that maybe you get on the program to do a presentation about how you use it in your classroom at one of these meetings. And we would be happy not to even ask you to do that on a volunteer basis, but we pay you something to do it. So just send me an email, bernie@flyoverzone.com. Send me an email to volunteer to get involved in this way. And I'll, as I say, happy to train you and pay you to do that.
I would do it without the pay, just for to have access to the tours would be fantastic in itself. But even without that, I think it's just such a valuable thing for the education of our next generation of students.
Thank you. Well, the deep thinking behind this goes back to research that I started doing in the 1970s about how to educate people, basically through the idea of curiosity arousal. And the basic idea there was just put eye candy in front of people and they'll pay attention. You got to get their attention, and you got to arouse their curiosity. And then that's already more than half the battle right there. And so I think our field, yes, I went off to a school of informatics, computing, and engineering, but I'm the humanist Trojan horse in that school, trying to keep humanities going, using those tools, the STEM tools. I wouldn't say against STEM, but to try to keep humanities going. And I think that well, I know that was my motivation. This is the kind of thing that's always, really turned me on intellectually. And I hope and assume that there are many young people who will have the same reaction once they see it. They'll want to learn more. Go on.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if many of us in this Zoom room have faced what I faced. When I came to Brandeis, there was not a classical archaeologist. They didn't really even know what that was. And I told my classical studies department, if you want to teach Latin and Greek language, which I am all in support of, having a strong classical studies department, you have to have a way to draw in those students who aren't automatically interested in philology. And that means colorful slides and exciting stories about these sculptural programs, mythology and the mythological wall paintings of Pompeii and sculptural examples. And that gets the scientists and the social scientists and the creative arts people all interested. And suddenly you have a lot of people double majoring in classical studies who don't necessarily do Latin or Greek, but they do the art and culture side of the classical world. So I just want to save us all everywhere across the country. I just feel so terrified sometimes that the first thing that tough administrators are going to do is say, well, look how few majors they have in Latin and Greek. Let's just remove that department. I don't think we're completely safe from that threat. So what you're doing is a wonderful way to attract that whole other element of the population.
Thank you. And our company is filled with STEM graduates. I mean, people who majored in computer science,
Sure.
and engineering, and they love working,
Sure.
on this kind of thing. And their salaries are really a half or a third of what they could get if they went into a pure tech company. And many of them, some of them anyway, turned down offers by Facebook and Google to be engineers there to work for us because they find it so much more fulfilling.
Yeah.
And those are the STEM major. If we can get them before they're the STEM graduates, when they're freshmen and sophomores, I think we have a great chance to get them to major in classics. And by the way, you forgot to mention among the learning aids that you found useful, your physical model of the Roman Forum.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure was very useful to you in getting students interested.
We are digitizing that now, in fact, and we're going to have a virtual tour available on the website. So you can be in California and tour our model of the Roman Forum, which is really an extraordinary model.
Yeah, I remember it very well. I'm sure that's helped you over the years.
For sure.
Does anyone else want to say anything before we sign off? All right. Well, then.
Thank you so much, Jason.
Well, thank you all. I'm glad that this sort of evolved into a bit of a brainstorming session on ways we could get the word out about Bernie's work. It's just so amazing what you've accomplished, and I think really has a lot of potential. So thank you so much for this talk and for giving us your time. And I'm sure you've converted a bunch of audience members who are ready to join your rep program, which it sounds like we thought up here, or your advisory board or anything else. So, best of luck, and thanks to everyone for coming. And we will post this on the YouTube channel as well. So if on the Paideia Media YouTube channel. So if you know anybody who'd like to see it, they can go there. We'll cut the part in the beginning, Bernie, where you were trying to get your mirror to disappear. But everything else will be posted.
Great.
All right. Okay, everyone. Well, have a great weekend.
You.
It was nice to see you all. Thanks again, Bernie.
You're welcome. And thank you. And thanks everyone for coming. Bye-bye.
Bye now.